Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another Destiny 2 video essay by your friend, Steven. Now, before I get started, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone that checked out my previous video, the thoughts on the changes of difficulty in Destiny 2. That video is popping off like crazy, and I appreciate everyone's support. Now, let's talk about I don't know, a little thing called Root of Nightmares. This somewhat newly released raid dropped a couple weeks after Lightfall's launch. It is the newest raid in the game, and listen, it took me a while to try to talk about this raid and make a video on it because I wanted to run it quite a few times, or at least a decent amount of times, really get a handle on it, collect my thoughts, and then kind of just talk about it. And I understand it's probably later than most content creators and everything, and well, like everything else, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of just kind of confusing decisions in this raid, and I want to kind of talk about my overall thoughts, maybe compare it to my favorite raid, compare it to the other raids in Destiny 2, and then offer some kind of chill out at the end, because I think that the community did get extremely up in arms over something with this raid that it didn't need to, and we'll go over that near the end of the video. As always, this is going to be a complete freeform. Background footage is me and my friends just running through the raid, and it's not going to be relevant. I'm not going to be timing things up to when I get to the encounters. We're just going to talk about the entirety of the thing, but enjoy the background. Huge shout out to Caesar again, my lovely video editor. Killed it with splicing this together. The original file for this was almost 2 hours long, and he got it down to about 30 minutes. So massive shout out to Caesar, which we will be shouting out yet again at the end. Anyway, enough of me jacking Rick Kakis's long intros. Thank you to the commenter that told me that, and let's get into my thoughts and impressions on the Root of Nightmares raid. Alright, so I want to talk about the atmosphere first of all. The atmosphere in Root of Nightmares, if you're unfamiliar, is actually a gorgeous and awesome metaphor for pretty much an overarching theme of the Light and Darkness saga. It's a molding of light and darkness on the Witness's pyramid ship after the Traveler strikes it with that beam of concentrated light. Now, I think aesthetically, this probably is one of my favorites, if not my favorite raid in the entirety of Destiny, not just Destiny 2, in the franchise. So I just think that this really hit at a perfect time for us with, the discovery and somewhat mastery of Strand, which is our second Darkness subclass after Stasis, and, us having the three light subclasses reworked, and we're just feeling super powerful in all aspects of the game. I thought it was really cool to mold together the light and dark coming together and merging to create while also destroying. That's a pretty big theme throughout this raid, as you can see in the background by the white and colorful organisms growing throughout the dark and oppressive nature of the pyramid ship architecture. I just love this almost good versus evil. It's almost like a battle. If you've played the raid before, you know that slowly as you progress through the raid, the structures, if you want to call it that, the what would you call it? The organisms? Sorry, I couldn't get that word out. They're just taking over the darkness, and it's breaking things open, and it's winding together, and it's creating this really cool, you have to platform across these organisms, and you have to go in the pyramid structure, and you get into these, as you can see in this area, the platforms of the rigid darkness of the pyramid. And then you have the twisting, almost hard to platform, and I don't mean literally difficult, I mean there's hard to platform on living organisms. It's so cool. I would honestly think it's my favorite aesthetic because it combines something I really love from my favorite raid, Vow of the Disciple, with the pyramid architecture, but it also adds this completely new concept that we haven't even seen since, I don't know, season 11, anything like traveler related organism is just so interesting. And I don't know, I'm gushing at it. And then you look in the background, as you can kind of see in the background clip, the traveler with the portal that's been opened by the witness. It's just awesome. So just to kind of, I said I wasn't going to go through every encounter, but I do want to reference them slightly. I think the first encounter is it's an okay intro to the main mechanic where you're connecting light and dark, and it's just, it's really cool, but at the same time, it is a little bit like the Spire mechanic where you're just, Spire of the Watcher, where you're just connecting A to B, and then A to C, and then B to D, and all that kind of stuff, So this first room is a nice introduction for aesthetics, but mechanically, not the biggest fan, honestly. I think it's a little basic, and that's going to be a theme that we're going to be rolling through with the rest of this video, is this raid is a little basic. And while I think that's actually an okay thing, I do understand the community with wanting more challenge, especially on a day one raid race, which I don't want to spend too much time on it. Do I think 2.5 hours was a little light for a day one? Absolutely. Do I think it's the worst thing in the world? No, it's fine. All right, so aesthetically, I think we need to talk about, I think the enemy type with the Shadow Legion Cabal, although it kind of makes sense, I kind of wish we would have gotten something a little different. You get the Tormentors in the first encounter, and that's really cool, but I think they were needed a lot more throughout the raid. I know they did pop up occasionally. If I do remember correctly, there's at least one in the later section? I don't know. I've only ran this raid 4 or 5 times. Not too sure, but we needed more Tormentors. We needed more of that kind of vibe. I just, I do think that there was something missed with having the Shadow Legion so intertwined in a raid where it just kind of seemed a little out of place, mostly because the Shadow Legion are too indistinguishable from the Cabal, just the normal Cabal. And so I do think there is an issue there. However, I'm nitpicking, but I am going to try to dig through a bunch of different things to, critique. Now, so, I kind of, as I said, this is all freeform. I do want to address the second encounter specifically, as you can see in the background footage. Now, I do enjoy this way more than the first encounter. I do think the crisscross mechanic with light and dark is awesome, and I do think that the buff needed to kill enemies is, it's a whatever thing. I don't really have any kind of inkling to saying I like it or that I don't like it. I think it's a little outplayed that you need X buff to kill X enemy. It's kind of dumb, but at the end of the day, it's nothing that's too crazy. And when you get to that last part, you can just kind of group up, fire in there, and just wipe the room. It's not terrible. However, the ascending part that we just saw on screen, how do I put this? They need to fix the buff disappearing. Now, before I continue, as of March 27th, 2013, when I am recording this video, there is a soft lock bug that can happen, I believe, if you complete the chain either too slowly, too quickly, or in a weird order. I'm not entirely sure what the trigger is, but if you get to this last little bit, which in the video is actually about to come up in reference, when you get to the last part where all you have to do is grab the buff and you have to wipe the enemies so you can get up to the next floor, it soft locks you, and there's no way to reset it unless you can use Colony to get right up on the enemies and shoot at their feet, and it blows them up. And for some reason that counts. Another way that we figured out when I was actually running this raid last night is you can use Tractor Cannon and knock them off the edge, and technically I guess that kills them. I just need to say this. I understand in video games there's going to be bugs, there's going to be issues. In a live service game, it's more prevalent, and I am more forgiving because it gives you the option to fix said bugs. what to me is actually unacceptable on Bungie's part. And Bungie, if anyone is watching, I love you guys. Trust me, I play this game almost obsessively. Now, you know what is not okay? When you have an encounter that doesn't work, it just flat out doesn't work. It soft locks you, there's an issue. Do not target the fix for the workaround that community came up with when you should be just fixing the mechanic. There was a patch, and luckily it was not implemented enough, so you can still, as of right now, use the prospector glitch, or you can use the tractor cannon glitch. Now, as of right now, the soft lock is still there. Actually, I think in the background footage, I may be incorrect, but I think we are experiencing a soft lock. And I believe you can still work around it, but Bungie, you need to make sure your encounters work. If I'm sounding a little bit like a jerk, I do apologize, but it is unacceptable to have a high-end piece of content like this and have it not function the way it should. That's just not okay. All right, sorry, I get really hung up on that because more times than not, we have ran into this soft lock. I think you can see it playing out in the background, honestly, and it's just absurd. What I will say, and about this second encounter, is it does have a really good... Sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself. I guess I am talking about the encounters as they come. But this second encounter encompasses something I love about Destiny 2 raids. And I love the encounter that is add density while trying to do a mechanic that is not necessarily a difficult mechanic, but it has to be in tandem with the other team doing the mechanic and timing. My favorite raid encounter in all of the game is Vow of the Disciples' third encounter. You know, the crazy one, the one that people don't like, the one that I always hear people complain about. I adore that encounter because when it does get executed properly, it's a well-oiled machine and it feels absolutely fantastic. This encounter has the potential to match that, where you're just getting something done really quickly, you're working with the mechanics, you're ad clearing, you're doing all that stuff. It's a little bit less challenging, in my opinion, than the third encounter of Vow, but it is nonetheless still good. It's also the encounter in Deepstone Crypt, where it is the third one. It's right before you crash land. It's when you're fighting Taniks, but you're not. It's on a boss phase. You know which one I'm talking about, the suppressor and the bomb dunks and everything like that. I love those fast-paced, hectic encounters, and it's some of my favorite moments in the game. And this has the potential, if they eventually fix the soft lock bug, to be something along those lines. Something that you can get a group of people that just has memorized the entirety of the chains, and they're able to just run through it. I think that's awesome. Let's talk overall about the light and dark connecting buff as a central mechanic, because unless you're counting the third encounter, it is the main mechanic. Mechanic. Good God, sorry about that. Again, this is what you get for unedited one-take footage. So, I would say as far as mechanics go, this is probably one of my least favorite. And it's not because conceptually, from a lore perspective, I find it very fascinating. Because you are slowly, if you didn't know, spoiler alert, I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Alright. This is the last... I should have opened up by saying there will be spoilers in this, but you are slowly, in pretty much the entirety of this raid until the final encounter, reviving Nezarec. You are bringing forward the final boss for you to kill. I do find that, lore-wise, absolutely fascinating. I find it so cool that you have to bring forth the enemy that you have to kill. That's awesome. That's great. That's fantastic. Could we have something a little bit more interesting than connect the dots? Connect the dots, to me, is very ho-hum. Now, as you can see in the background footage yet again, we have found ourselves at the third encounter. I'm not going to try to say his name, but the planet room is easily the best part of this raid. There has been some speculation here and there that, you know, maybe this encounter was pulled out of a different raid and plugged in here. I think conceptually, though, it does fit the theme of the Witness's ship. If you remember that that's the ship that you're supposed to be on, and that's the ship you're on, this was on the, the Witness's ship. This room is Bungie putting an encounter's artwork and mechanics just top notch. They put it above everything else. They worked on atmosphere, they worked on the vibe, and then they had the mechanics go. And let's be honest, mechanics wise, it's pretty simple. You're simply standing on plates, you're killing an enemy, you're looking at readouts, callouts, whatever you want to call it. You're looking at the planets, you're swapping sides with the person opposite of the room, you're dunking that. Then after you do that, you're just taking light or dark planets, dunking it in the middle room, and then you get a decently sized DPS window with 3 plates. It's nothing that we haven't seen before in Destiny, but it is executed in a room that is so gorgeous. And I do enjoy that this feels like a classic Destiny, classic Bungie raid encounter. It feels like you have so many people actually moving, whereas in the first 2 encounters, and I haven't even talked about this yet, and we'll get into this in just a second, but after I finish up on this encounter. But this is the first encounter, and arguably the only encounter, where it feels like everyone has a significant job to do. Because if you're not running planet duty, you need to be clearing ads, which actually helps this time. It's not just something you throw your buddy on when you're Sherpaing him, or the person you don't trust in the clan on ad clear, or that one person that just refuses to learn the mechanics. Ad clear is important because there is a mechanic tied in with the Centurions that spawns the lieutenants for you on the plate duty to kill. And I find that to be just dynamite. I find it to be so cool that everyone is engaged and everyone is paying attention. This was the only part of the raid that I was able to attempt on contest mode, just because I didn't have the time to run the raid, but I did jump in for about 4 to 5 hours with friends trying to help them. And we had it down. It's just, little hiccups here and there. So, what I said I was going to talk about when it came to dealing with it does feel like this raid is easy and is easier. It's got a deep stone crypt feel for me personally, and I do think that it is on the easier side. I don't think that's an issue, but this encounter feels like a genuine, somewhat challenge, And it's not challenging because, the enemies are cheap or there's a really quick wipe mechanic. It feels very much classic Bungie, and I appreciate it. And I just wish the rest of the raid had this vibe of the planet room. Yes, big cabal, not interesting boss. I understand that. However, in this situation where you're doing something so interesting visually and also mechanically, yes, at the end of the day, you're trading sides with people. That's not the most crazy interesting thing in the world. However, it is something that I think is more visually stimulating than staring at white ball goes to other white ball and dark yellowish gray ball goes to other dark yellowish gray ball. I do appreciate Bungie for making this. This is a standout encounter. This is classic Bungie, classic them, and I really do appreciate this, and I can't wait to see more encounters like this in future raids. Because if the final shape raid shapes up, get it, but to be anything like this, then I think we're in for one heck of a final raid of the Light and Darkness saga. Just a couple of other small things to wrap up before we get to the big finale. As far as this is concerned on easy raid scale, it is subjective, and I understand that. I would put it a little bit more difficult than Deepstone Crypt, and I do consider Deepstone and Vault of Glass to be the easiest raids in Destiny 2. However, I do think this one will get even easier with time, and it might even drop on something a little bit along the lines of with Deepstone instead of in front of it in difficulty. Now, guys, difficulty does not mean dumb or disappointing. If it's easy or if it's hard, people are allowed to feel however they want to feel. This is that standard part in the video where I want to sit back and tell you that, you know what? If somebody thinks this raid is too easy, they're right. If somebody thinks this raid is too hard, they're also right. If somebody thinks it's just right, hey, can you guess? They're correct. They're right. However else you want to say it, difficulty, as well as difficulty in raids, is subjective. What might be easy for one person could be pretty difficult for the next. And that's just going to say as simple as, I have friend groups that think Deepstone is difficult. I have friend groups that have gone through Deepstone in less than 30 minutes and have 2 or 3 manned Deepstone. It is subjective. So in the comments, because I know inevitably we're going to talk about it, and I would love to hear what you have to say about Root of Nightmares, let's just keep it respectful and understand that, you know what, I might think this raid is dummy easy. That doesn't mean that the person that thinks it's difficult is wrong. So respect each other. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but I'm going to continue to say it until everybody, you know, and until everyone gets that through their head. I'm a little bit killing time to make sure that I can spend a little bit of time on Nezarec, because he is the final boss. But let's talk about it right now. Nezarec is kind of like how I feel about the overall raid. Aesthetically, an absolute plus and a hit, and I love it. I find it to be super, super cool that this character in the lore that has been built up so heavily and feared and hinted at for so long is finally making his appearance, especially because in Lightfall we got a heck of a build-up. And this is one of those first raid bosses, maybe outside of, what, Oryx, maybe Crota, that we know who we're going to fight. And there is almost a hype train up to it. With Rolk, we didn't know Rolk was coming, which is part of the allure of Vow of the Disciple, is he just was there and he was completely different. It was crazy. But as for Nezarec, I think this is some of the biggest hype we've had since Oryx in the Taken King, and I think that is awesome. I think lore-wise, aesthetically, it's probably one of the coolest ways to build up hype, is to do it in like an expansion or a season, because they have been building Nezarec hype since season 18, season Plunder, when we had the Nezi Cafe, and, you know, Osiris had his little cup of tea, and for some reason that revived him. That's fine, we don't need to get into that. But Nezarec's build-up and then eventual reveal, and the way he taunts you throughout this raid, and you just know it's going to be Nezarec, I think is something that we haven't seen hyped up. I say since the Taken King, but I would argue even never before, because Nezarec is something that we have seen coming for quite a long time, and it's great to finally fight him. It's great to finally put a name to the face, even if he looks a little different than people were expecting. I personally really enjoy his design. I think it's really cool. When the footage in the background starts to show it, we'll talk about Nezarec more. But I think build up to that was so well done. Kudos, Bungie. Having said that, he has a subtitle, The Final God of Pain. And whilst lore-wise he is built up to be that, in the raid, in this beautiful, haunting, somewhat mundane raid, he really kind of just drops the ball, which is a shame, because the Final God of Pain should not feel just like a jabroni, you know? He shouldn't just feel like another guy on the street. And I wish that he was a bit more aggressive. And I'm going to continuously relate him to Rolk, because for me, Rolk is the only other disciple besides Callus that we fought, and Rolk is like the top of the mountain for me when it comes to raiding bosses and encounters almost entirely. So I do wish he would have had more Rolk-esque, where he was just intimidating and scary, and he didn't need to run at you. He didn't need to charge you full on. Nezarec, does pursue you relentlessly, which don't be, twisted here. It's amazing to see the most mobile boss in Destiny 2 raid history. It's awesome to see. However, Rolk kind of sulked around until you popped him into his actual damage phase, and then he was a force to be reckoned with. It felt, if to be honest, a little less mobile than I would like. Nezarec is beautifully mobile. He runs at you, he charges at you. As you can see in the background footage, he just gets in the way of everything. And even though you can have somebody take the hatred and tank the damage with a Well of Radiance, which is what I believe my good friend Rachel was doing in the background, or at least she was dodging him. Here's where Nezarec struggles. As you can see in the background, we are getting ready for DPS. All you have to do is stand right there. Just stand on a platform. He can teleport. He can suppress you. He can, throw occasional void, whatever those things are, at you. But that's it. That's how you lock the final god of pain of the brand new raid into place. Check that out. Sometimes you'll just stand there, let you shoot him, let you throw supers, grenades, debuffs, heavy weapons. You'll just stand there. He can sort of tickle you, but inside of Well of Radiance, you're not in trouble. Why in the hell is the final god of pain one of the most legendary disciples, arguably the most legendary disciple at the Witness's disposal, the one that ushered in our first collapse, the one that had to be betrayed by Savathun, the one that we found his quote-unquote relics and was so powerful we brought Osiris back from a coma after being possessed by Savathun, the one that was haunting the Neomunai, that sounds right, in the Arc Cloud upload, haunting them, giving them nightmares. The one that the Briar lore book or lore on the armor, and I can't remember any of the other names, but the other disciples of Nezarec, the cult of Nezarec, feared and had some horrific stories. Why can you stand on a platform? And after he, who has been revived by you and is half dark and half light, after his bits being regenerated, why can you just stand on a platform in a Well of Radiance like we did to every other raid boss except for Rolk? Why is this something that Bungie didn't think we were going to do? This is a bit of a rant for me. Mechanically, this fight, I can't wait until they make it so they can knock us out. He can knock us out of a Well of Radiance or suppress us out of it. I can't wait till this guy actually gets his namesake proven, because this guy is a joke, and he shouldn't be. He should be the most formidable opponent we have ever faced in a raid. Even in the background, you get a glimpse of it. You see how he threw us off the edge. He should be the final god of pain. He should act like it. He should be something that you don't get a solid stand in a well DPS phase. Nezarec deserves better, and hopefully we see it better, because the encounter itself is awesome. Him, his design, his vibe, great. He just needs to act like his namesake. As far as other raids compared to this one and in the Pantheon, I'd put it somewhere on the, maybe right in line with Deepstone Crypt. Maybe 4th or 5th on the list. I think the raid is good. I think its length is fine. Yes, it's short. Yes, it wasn't difficult. I think that's okay. I think there's a place for raids where they don't always have to be Last Wish, where they don't always have to be Spire of Stars. They can be just okay. They can be just standard. It's a way to bring new players into the game, and I can accept that. And maybe Master Mode will kick our ass, and that would be pretty cool. But I think it's really cool to have a raid that takes place where it does, looks like it does, and has this awesome vibe. I like this raid. I don't love this raid. And that's just okay. Thank you guys for watching. Huge shout out to Caesar. If you liked the video, please leave your comments below. Please like and subscribe. Helps me out a lot. Let's push this video like we did the last one. And as I said, let's have a civilized and friendly discussion about this raid in the comments section below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.